Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba. You probably didn't think there was that much to talk about hoses, but here we are. The length of a hose is usually measured end to end, including the metal parts. Some manufacturers only measure the actual flexible bit of a hose, but the hose will only be maybe like a centimetre or two longer than expected. But we have settled on a range of standard lengths for all sorts of different uses. But if you really want a really specific length, one can be made for you by some suppliers, but of course it's going to cost you some more. Those little rubber things on the end of your hose covering, the metal bits, they're there to help prevent the hose from bending and pulling in that particular spot and damaging the hose. Too much repetitive bending in that one spot will wear that spot on the hose and it's going to shorten its life. The downside to these hose protectors is that they can hold water against the hose and cover up any damage underneath that you might not notice until it's too late. So pull them back from time to time to look underneath. If you do want to remove a hose protector or a boot from your gauges, but it's just too tough or stiff, soaking it in hot water can help soften the rubber up so it's nice and stretchy and you can pop the boot off or the protector off, but try to keep any water out of the hose if you're dunking it. Also dab a little bit of grease and rotate the hose protector whilst you're trying to pull on it to actually remove it. That can always help. A standard set of regulators is really easy to coil up. If you imagine they have two halves, grab the hoses on one side, cross them over the other hoses, and then grab wherever they cross over, and then just let it all drop down. They'll be quicker and easier to pack without bending any one hose in particular, and if you're hanging the regulators on some kind of hook, they should hang there pretty properly. There are three male fittings that go onto your first stage, the smallest of which is 3/8 of an inch, which is used on most second stage regulator hoses. BCD and Drysuit hoses as well, they're usually 3/8 of an inch. High pressure hoses for gauges and transmitters, they are universal, they are all the same, so you don't have to worry about those. And on a rare few set of regulators, the primary second stage might be fitted with a 1/2 inch screw thread. If in doubt, you can always literally measure these to work out which size screw thread for the hose you need. Screw threads on a regulator hoses can be, or they can unscrew themselves from time to time. Just moving second stages around and getting kitted up, it kind of turns the hoses, so it's important that they're tightened properly, not just finger tight. The metal though that we use is chrome plated brass, which is quite a soft metal, so if you tighten the hoses up too much, you can actually strip the threads and damage your regulator. So tighten them up by hand, just finger tight, and then with a proper spanner or a wrench, not an adjustable one, nip it up about 1/4 of a turn, if that. Technically it's about 5 Newton meters if you're using a proper torque wrench. Inflator hoses have a small valve in the end that you can actually take out in most standard valves. In the middle you will find a little pin. If you push on that, it opens up the valve. Some Schrader valves have a longer or shorter pins, and if you look at the bit it connects to on your inflator, it often has like a metal bar. These are different sizes as well, so in some rare combinations of hose and inflator, you can find that some inflator hoses that just don't inflate, so you might have to swap out that Schrader valve. A thin film of silicone grease helps your O-rings to slip into the right place and create an effective seal. Dry O-rings tend to stick and catch, which can wear them out and cause leaks. Too much grease though can get debris like dust and hair and stuff stuck into it, so you only need a small amount of grease. Pop a small drop of grease onto the tip of one of your fingers and then kind of massage the O-ring between two fingertips to coat it. That should be just about enough. The female end of a high pressure hose should always have a swivel pin inside of it. A small metal bar with a small O-ring on each end goes between your gauges and the hose itself. Without it, it's just going to leak. Sometimes though it does get stuck inside the hose or inside the SPG. Just give it a little bit of a wiggle and it'll come out, but do make sure that you check that the O-ring doesn't get stuck inside either the hose or the gauge. So give them a little bit of grease again when you pop them back in so that your gauges turn and don't leak and your O-ring is going to come out freely. You should be using a spanner or a wrench, depending on what you call it, to tighten and loosen your hoses. If you can, do your best to use a fixed size spanner, as adjustable wrenches can have some wiggle room and loosen themselves, and slipping on the nut can strip and round the corners and just damage your hoses and regulators. Some manufacturers use metric sizes, others use imperial. So whilst you may think that you have the most appropriate spanner size that fits, there should be very little wiggle room. You might have the wrong size spanner if it does wiggle around a little bit, and you might have the metric version of the imperial. High pressure hoses often have a line of pinholes down the length of the hose. This is normal. They're there to allow air underneath the external shell to escape. If you see a small stream of bubbles coming out of them at the start of the dive, that's fine, as long as they stop. If they keep streaming, there could be a problem with your hose, so do be aware of that. And if you see water seeping out of them after the dive, that's perfectly fine as well. That's just water that's soaked in. Don't worry too much. It's more about a lot of gas leaking out of those hoses. Then you need to swap that hose. A handful of handy tips for your regulator hoses. Let me know if you have any tips for diving hoses and pop them down in the comments section below. And remember to head over to simplyscuba.com if you need any new hoses. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.